Okay, just to remind everybody that we're live streaming. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Service and Assets Committee meeting Tuesday, 12th of April. Good to see that the drought has broken in Southland, so it'll make a number of farmers very, very happy, I'm sure, and some of the communities who've been struggling for water as well. So I've got an apology from Councillor Duffy, and also got a note from Councillor Rattenclaw, who will be attending a bit later on. So I'll move that we accept Councillor Duffy's apology. Do I have a second for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Menzies. All those in favour, just please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
It's carried. Thank you for that. Any leave of absence coming up for anybody? Nobody's going away overseas? No? Okay.
I'll be away in July.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you for that notice. Any conflict of interest on the agenda items that are in front of us today? There being none, we'll move on. There's no public forum, and to my knowledge, there are no extraordinary urgent items to be discussed this morning. Right, that being the case, we'll go to item number 6, confirmation of the previous minutes. So I'm comfortable that there'll be a true and accurate record, so I'll move that we accept the previous minutes. So I have a second for that, please. So thank you, Councillor Fraser, much appreciated. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against? Carried. Thank you for that. So we'll go straight into the reports, and the first one is item 7.1, Downer Water and Wastewater. It's on page 15 of your agenda, so we'll move straight to that. Tim, are you going to present this?
Yep, thank you very much. I've nothing really too much new to add to this. I take everyone's read the report. I just want to point out the non-compliance under section 5 there, which is environmental, which occurred at Nightcaps. It did exceed our E. coli count, and it is a rare occurrence. The last time this happened was in 2019, and we believe it doesn't hold any threat to the to Environment Southland or anything like that. So our compliance team and Downer QA very confident in this. We believe it is a result of recent great weather and low flows where we discharge that contributed to the high count there. Other than that, I just want to touch on a couple of recent events here. So water skiers in Homestead and Mossburn, which, thankfully for the rain, haven't heard too much more about that. Councillor Douglas with Mossburn there, I see the Riti River's climbed to 8 cumex, which is high for the month. So it should be recharging that aquifer and helping with supply for the town there.
Yeah, pleased to hear that.
Yeah.
Just an update on your comment with the Homestead, the water scheme there. We had to take some reasonable action to get sufficient water from the Whitestone River, and we had to make a slight channel to get some water to the pump station, and which has all been ticked off, so that was great. And also believe there's now also a new pump at the pump station itself, and pumping around about 4 meters per second, which has really helped all those farmers in that particular area. So that was a pretty good result. So I appreciate all the effort that everybody put in there. It's much appreciated. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Councillor Harper.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Just to comment on the, it's not actually in this report, but I'd just like an update on the Otahu Flat Eastern Bush water supply. Quite some time back, it was estimated to be $1.4 million to do the upgrade. rising main from the river to the Otahu Flat tanks, and they are having trouble getting water, getting a supply. Normally the supply comes from the Wairaki River, and it's a bit dirty, and it's got a few drinking water tanks, or a few houses using the water for household use, but only about 2 or 3. I see the latest estimate has gone up to about 2.5 million. So I'm just wondering if a bit of research should not be done into this thing. It might be cheaper to put water tanks on those half a dozen houses and revert the whole system back to stock, because I don't believe that there's anything wrong with the intake of the Wairaki Bridge for stock water, but it's not suitable for drinking water. But I stand to be corrected on that. So is Bill or somebody there that can give us an update there?
I am a sole representative from Water and Waste today. That is a question I'll need to pass on to either Joe Finley or Bill. With them there, they'll be better suited to answer that. So if I could get that and get back to you, Councillor Harper, with an answer. Yeah.
Right.
Yep, I think that's the best approach. It's not in the report, as Councillor Harper did indicate right from the start of his comments. So it would be useful, just as a reminder to the committee members, that if you have very specific issues like Councillor Harper has raised and are quite genuine, that maybe they'll also give the staff some pre-warning that you like to have that sort of information as well, because that will be quite useful for everybody to hear as well. So just a bit of a update there. No further questions on this report. So it does relate to February, and of course you did touch about last month that it's been pretty dry, and thank goodness we've had a bit of rain, so some of those issues have disappeared. Right, I'm happy to move that we accept and receive this report. Do I have a second for that, please? Councillor Owen, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, against, carried. Thank you for that. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
We'll go straight to 7.2, road operations. And Rob, you're going to talk to this one?
Good morning, yes. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and councillors. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, good.
Yeah, road operations, February 22. We'll take the report as read and just cover a couple of highlights throughout the report. Just to note a wee bit of restructuring in the services and assets with the cycle trail and Manapori Airport coming into transport. Obviously, you've been touching on it for the last few minutes about dry weather and stuff. Causing a few issues with maintenance activities regarding primarily grading and stuff. With our ability to grade with the dry gravels doesn't end in a good result. So there's a few RFSs around that. On track for spend, on track for grading and metaling activities, and capital spend wise, all the pavement rehabs and bridge replacements are all on track, so which is very pleasing. Yeah, we just really are business as usual. Everyone's busy, but nothing really of great note through February, Mr. Chair. So,
okay, thank you for that. And of course, with the good weather that we have been having, has certainly helped to keep that production up with regards to metaling and grading and all those roading activities. So that's certainly been very helpful. And also on, I did see on page 29, the carbon footprint. And I was interested to read that, and also interested to see what activities are being undertaken to mitigate some of the carbon. And that was really good to see. So I'll see how they're going to manage to reduce the idle times of their machinery and explore opportunities on the network for closer gravel pits. So once again, reducing the number of travel time that they need to undertake. So it's good to see that that's being monitored, and certainly look forward to future reports and just see if there's going to be a trend that is going downwards. And I'm sure that everybody will be wanting to see that. I see a couple of hands up. So first of all, Councillor Ford.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. How are we getting on with dust suppression? This very dry season we've had, expect everybody will notice the dust, but perhaps a comment.
I think we've got a workshop item on that particular item, Councillor Ford, after this meeting. And I think Hartley is going to join us and present us with an update on the dust suppression and also on auto seal, I believe. Matt, is that correct?
Thank you.
Through you,
That's
Mr. Chair. Thank you. Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chair. Other than the auto seal option and level of service that has been integrated into service offering through this most recent LTP, I'll just remind Council that there is no other level of service associated with dust suppression across our more than 3,000 kilometres of gravel road network. So the only level of service associated with dust suppression is the new level of service associated with auto seal option introduced at the last LTP. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. No, thanks for that, Matt. Appreciate it. I see Councillor Harper, you've got your hand up.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Around the mountain cycle trail in the Tiano Airport, I see they've been transferred to the transport team to manage now. Will they stay as an individual commercial operation, or are they just going to be swamped up with the roading infrastructure? They are commercial businesses and should be run as such. And I'm just interested whether they're going to stay as the individual unit or what's happening there.
Thank you for that question. Happy to pass it over to Matt if you want to make first response.
Yes, through you, Chair. Councillor Harper, there's no change to the funding associated with the business units. Just the activity or group of activities that those business units will slot in under. Given that both the airport and the Around the Mountain Cycle Trail are associated with transportation activities, and the sorts of maintenance and operational contractors that we tend to utilise for each of those activities are closely aligned with our roading contractor resources. It made sense to transition the management across to that activity, and that was a decision taken by council through the last LTP when we consolidated the number of activities and groups from, I think it was from somewhere in the high 20s down to 13. From an efficiency perspective, that made a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Matt.
Any other questions that you may have on this report? Comments? I've got one interesting question, and I'm hoping somebody can explain this to me. On the incident register, I see there's a incident on saw forearm due to repetition on joystick. Somebody want to make comment on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I assume that's, I'll have to find out, but I assume that's to do with either an excavator or a lot of these new graders are coming out as joystick control rather than steering wheels and controls. So
Fine. Thank you.
It's not what you probably initially thought and were chuckling about, to be fair.
Let's keep the incidents at a high level. Thank you. Right. Councillor Douglas.
Well, I'm probably not going to improve things along that line. Well, just on the same incident register, the grader blade bumped the fence post. Now, if you bump a fence post with a grader blade, you're almost certainly going to break it.
Yes.
And was it replaced?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I don't have all the details, but I'll have to come back to you on that, Councillor Douglas.
Yeah, look, I don't want to be nitpicking, but if council machinery broke private property, is it in our modus operandi that we would replace or fix it?
I'm sure that it
Always.
would be, but I'm sure it would be. I could see Matt wishing to respond as well. So Matt.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, always.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. No further questions. I'll move that we receive the report. Do I have a second for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Scott. All those in favour, please say aye.
Right.
Yeah, against, carried. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The next report is 7.3 Service and Asset Program. Brendan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, councillors. So if we could take the Services and Assets Program report as read, and then I'll summarise some of the content and then take any questions at the end, which hopefully I can answer. If I can't, I may throw them across to Nick. But so going forward, the March 29th council meeting approved the reforecast figures for February. So I guess we're looking at the $45 million, program now, rather than the original sort of 52 that we were looking at. So I will report on those figures going forward in my reports. So to that, then we are sitting at 46% of our February reforecasted value of 45 million. It is important, and I've left it in there to remember that some of those reforecasted values are where we have been able to save a reasonable amount of money through the procurement or through the packages of works that we've put out. We have been working closely with the project delivery team. We're looking at different ways of procuring our services to try and mitigate the volatile material and increase in labour costs and issues that our contractors are facing in regards to COVID-19 and the impacts that it's having on their workforce. We had a monthly turnover, or a monthly spend, I should say, in February of 3.5 million. So that's still progressing quite well. We do, in fact, have our busiest months again in March, April, and May. So look forward to, I guess, the increase in productivity over those 3 months. And that's where the bulk of our, or quite a lot of our work is being programmed to be undertaken. At the time of writing the report, we still have a vacancy for a project manager, which is becoming quite challenging to fill that position. I don't want to fill the position just to have a bottom in a seat. I actually would like to employ someone who's actually going to have a great impact on the delivery, or to assist in the delivery of what is a fairly significant program. So that's still ongoing. The Tourism Infrastructure Fund, all the information has been supplied to MB as of Friday last week, I think it was, or mid last week, to secure those funding agreements with MB. There are the resource consents that we're waiting on for the new toilet at Manapuri there, and the boat ramps, but in discussion with Environment Southland, we are hoping that those resource consent applications are specifically for the boat ramps can be processed in a hurry. So Environment Southland have given us an indication that they, all going well, should have those processed in around 5 to 7 days. So we are already looking at procuring services for those boat ramps. So that's already underway, even though we don't actually have the resource consents yet. We have the designs, we have the methodology. So we have, by all accounts, everything that we need to start procuring. So that's being undertaken now in lieu of getting those resource consents, so that basically we can hit the ground running, recognising that the lake levels are incredibly low at the moment, and it's an opportune time to pull the trigger for those projects. So moving on to the activity overview, obviously a list of some of the projects that we've completed recently, a list of some of the projects that are due to start shortly, and then moving on to the actions from the last report. So I did send an email to all councillors regarding the Winton Library project and the estimated completion and proposed dates for the soft opening and the hard opening. Councillor Douglas, I've left your agenda item on there, or your query on there regarding council, I guess, measuring cost increases. And if we were measuring cost increases, which we are, so in conjunction with, or in asking Hartley if he had some figures that he could give to me that I could publicise to this forum. He said that one area that they've seen quite an increase in over previous years is the resale contracts. That's sitting at around 15% increase over last year. So if we put that into dollar terms, there's potentially a $780,000 increase if we sat with the original program. But if you look at the roading update, which is on page 8, Hartley actually refers to that and how they're mitigating those cost increases with changing the program where necessary. So obviously there's not a massive overspend in that space. So that's, yeah, as I say, around 15% in the reselling, 15% increase in the reselling program. And Waka Kotahi actually publicise the cost index increases. And so they've indicated an 8 to 10% increase in construction activities. So if we put that again into some dollar terms in relation to our rehab program for this year, there's potentially somewhere between the 264,000 and 330,000 cost increase to provide the same level of service. So obviously we've got a program for next year that we're wanting to achieve. That program may just need to be adjusted slightly to take those cost increases into account. So
before you go on, can I just
sorry.
interrupt? No, you're right. You're right. Councillor Douglas, going to give you the opportunity to make any comment there. You did raise that question in our previous meeting.
Yes, well, I mean, we're a services and assets committee. It is about getting the work done at a reasonable cost price. And I just asked that question last time because I understood that there would be cost increases. And thanks very much for being able to quantify for those. And it's the time we're in, and I'm sure the staff are doing their best to make the contracts as efficient as possible. And it's good to hear that they're doing that packaging and looking for ways of being efficient and effective.
Yep, and support your comments enough, Councillor Douglas. Absolutely spot on. I'm surprised that the increase in costs that you've estimated are at that level. Quite honestly, I thought that they would have been greater. And my personal view is that I think they will escalate more than what you've anticipated, considering what's happening overseas, and that is certainly going to have an impact on us. And also what's happening internally with closure of some of the industries is certainly going to have an impact as well. So I think those figures will certainly escalate. And then we'll have to look at the program to see what we're going to be doing next year. And as you say, some of those areas will, in all probabilities, need to be trimmed back so that we do stay within budget. And I think that's paramount. And support Councillor Douglas' comments that you are working hard to make it as efficient and effective as possible, and certainly recognising the external influences that are having an impact on our delivery, on our services. So you're right on the button. Sounds good.
Thank you.
So carry on with your report.
Look, I guess, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, the only other thing that I wanted to highlight was I had updated the Capital Works program critical risk graph bit of a mouthful. Specifically, number one, the COVID-19 supply issues, just had updated that and updated the comments to reflect. So that was potentially the only other change that we had made through that. So happy to open up to any kind questions.
That was a nice rider. Councillor Ford. Councillor Ford.
Yeah,
You're there? No,
yeah, I'm unmuted now. I
Yep.
see we have the new reception area in 4th Street. What does that consist of? And is there any action to the old building that we had the earthquake-prone arrangements? Because no doubt there is a term of lease on our current chamber. What's happening on that bundle of stuff, please?
Thanks, Nick.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The work happening at 4th Street has been planned for some time. It's a safety and security update, as well as ventilation and heating in that area. So that's still, obviously 4th Street has still been, or that part of the building has always been maintained as being kept. The other areas obviously have been closed off and just being monitored. So we're not committing any funds to the old part of the building, which has effectively been closed off. Only those areas that are still being occupied by staff and by visitors. In regards to our lease at Don Street, that's a 5-year lease with rights of renewal. So we've got still got plenty of time in that area.
Just a mention of a new reception area at 4th Street. Well, that new was the bit that caught my eye. There is a reception area. Does something have to be refurbished, or what's the essence of that? It's
through you, Mr. Chair. So we are refurbishing we are putting a new counter in. The current one there is just not fit for purpose, given that is our primary area for the bulk of our transactions with our community.
Jolly good, thank you.
Mayor Tom, so you got your hand up?
Yeah, sorry, I did take it down, Chair. I was just going to comment on the very good work that's been undertaken, and this timetables is absolutely brilliant. And it just makes me wonder where we would have been without COVID. We would have been well ahead of everything. So top marks to everyone for doing what you're doing. I did have one query around the boat ramp stuff. It says replacement. I went up there 3 or 4 years ago and I thought it was just maintenance, but I may be wrong. And if obviously I get the picture that we need to have consent for replacement, but surely we don't have to have consent for maintenance.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that they may have looked quite good, but they're certainly, unfortunately, in a state of disrepair. There is quite a bit of there's quite a lot of area underneath the boat ramps, which have actually the gravel has washed away. So basically, the spanning an area. There's quite a few areas where the boat actually gets dropped back down, where the segments of slabs have separated. So there's quite a large and dangerous drop off when people back their vehicles and trailers down. The one at Steamers Beach particularly is under width, so incredibly difficult if you're not so skilled at backing to drop off the edge of the ramp. And what else was the separation of the slabs is probably one of the bigger ones, and the undermining of the slabs themselves, just with the wave action, is quite a significant reason why these boat ramps are being replaced.
Thank you for that clarification.
Councillor Keast, to see you have your hand up. You have a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, on page 42, there's under the stimulus program. Does that mean, well, all the AC water main renewals projects have been completed? Does that mean that am I right in thinking that AC is the asbestos, or is that another terminology?
Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, that's asbestos cement.
So do we have any remaining asbestos pipes in our system, or are these just the ones that were targeted under the stimulus program?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct. We still have some in our network. These were just targeted as the primary focus of the initial stimulus funding.
And will there be a plan to replace them, or are they not causing issues at this stage, not prioritised?
I see Matt's got his hand up. Maybe Matt, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had, from memory, roughly a quarter of our network was asbestos cement, Councillor Keast, and through the LTP, we bumped up reasonably significantly our renewals budget year on year to target asbestos cement reticulation, particularly associated with our water supply. Not because it poses any risk or danger, but simply because of its age and life cycle, and it's reaching the point at which replacement is necessary. Asbestos cement was a really common reticulation material roughly 50 to 60 plus years ago. And as I say, a large parts of our network is AC reticulation and is nearing point of renewal. We used the stimulus funding as an opportunity to accelerate some of that replacement. You might recall, and it's been we established a panel of contractors, and because a lot of that replacement is like for like, same capacity, same pipe size, same location, there was an opportunity to establish a design build panel and accelerate some of that work, and we've been fortunate to in that approach has worked really productively, and we've finished those AC replacements well within the planned timeline. But in answer to your question, we have got a program of ongoing AC replacements throughout the remainder of this LTP and beyond, associated with our overall reticulation renewal program.
So thanks for that, Matt. Will you use the same sort of program that has worked so well? Would that just be because we had the stimulus package so that you would do that, or would you use the same system of delivery again?
Through you, Mr. Chair, really good question, Councillor Keaston. And from our perspective, the stimulus funding provided an opportunity for us to trial that procurement methodology and that panel approach, and we found it to be really successful, and the feedback from our contractors has been really positive. And in particular with the SDC work, it's a combined panel across local government in Southland, and we understand it's been working well for our other local government partners also. So we're certainly in discussion around extending that delivery approach and that delivery mechanism, but of course we want to ensure that it's fair and equitable for all contractors in the region. So we'll be looking at renewing that panel and opening it up to other contractor service providers as well in due course. But Nick is perhaps better placed to talk to the longer term delivery objectives with that particular panel. But from my opinion as the asset owner, we've been really pleased with the way that approach has served council and our ratepayers, and would advocate for a continuation of that approach in the right set of circumstances. Obviously, that sort of procurement approach doesn't work in all circumstances. We have a significant range of procurement mechanisms and approaches across our large program of works. But in this instance, as I said, given the like-for-like nature, the lack of complexity associated with that particular activity and the specialist nature and limited contractor resource to deliver that work, it really has made sense to work very closely with the contractors in our market that have the skills and experience to undertake that sort of work in an open and transparent manner, with a quantity surveyor on hand to ensure that rates are where they need to be, benchmarked nationally and locally, and that we're getting value for money through that process.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Matt. Answer your question there, Councillor Keast? Okay, thank you. And just a question from myself. I see your hands up, Councillor Menzies, but before I go to you, just a question for you, Matt, with regards to how is the asbestos managed? Does it stay in the ground? Is it taken away to a special landfill? What happens with the asbestos pipes themselves, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and look, after I've responded, I'll also hand over to Brendan and Nick, who may have some additional context. But speaking generally about how AC is generally managed, it has a lot to do with the installation methodology. So if we're using trenchless technology, which means either pipe bursting or drilling, the AC remains in the ground undisturbed. If we are trenching on the same alignment, we are removing the AC in the process using authorised asbestos contractors. The pipe is removed and bagged and taken to a specific contamination specialist disposal site using a specific PPE, protective gear for the operators. If it's and lastly, if it's being trenched but on a different alignment, again the pipe is left in situ, because of course with asbestos cement pipe, the danger is when it becomes friable, is when the pipe is disturbed and cut or dug. That's when it becomes friable and poses a risk to anyone in the vicinity. So if we can leave it undisturbed, that's a cost-effective, low-risk approach.
Thank you for that. Councillor Menzies, thank you for waiting.
Thank you. A couple of questions now. Just first in relation to the boat ramp. So it sounds like a situation where they may look fine from the surface, and I imagine locals using the boat ramps are quite or have the knowledge around the vagaries of the recent description that's just given. Are there warning signs placed there for those who haven't used those boat ramps before? And I think you said it requires an experienced person to kind of put those in, and not all had that experience. So how are others than locals aware of those issues until the replacement occurs?
That's a really good question. Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that there have been some warnings posted and there has been some temporary very temporary repairs. So where the slabs have gapped, there has been rocks and fill placed between those slabs so that the wheels of the trailers or the vehicles don't drop down into them. I guess following on from a comment earlier, we do require a resource consent for maintenance. It would appear some time ago that those resource consents had perhaps lapsed or were relinquished, I think back in 2012, so long before probably any of us were aware of it. So obviously going forward, we need to maintain those resource consents once we get them. Resource consents generally allow for maintenance and any sort of fix up and type things, using different methods obviously of concrete and things like that, but we can obviously do some minor type repairs which obviously don't have perhaps an environmental impact.
Thank you for that. It's just making sure that the warning signs are prominent. We can't always guarantee people read them, but at least they're there. And the second question just relates to the asbestos cement. So where the pipes are left in situ, I'm just thinking of the potential for in the future to be dug up because people are unaware that they're there because there's a new alignment with the more recent piping. How do people find out that information? Is that record being kept somewhere? What is the process? Thanks.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Geospatially, Councillor Menzies, in our GIS system, we retain the pipe alignment within GIS, but note that it's no longer in service. So the reason we do that, of course, is for future works where other contractors are working in the vicinity of that pipe alignment. They're aware that it's in place, and if they come across it, are able to deal with it in an appropriate way if they have to dig it up or dig up a portion of it, or steer clear of it.
Okay, thank you. Excellent, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Keast, I see you have your hand up.
Yes. Referred to my notes a little bit better than what I did before. When will we see the planned bridge replacement priorities?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that would be something that I would have to get from the transport team, and I'm happy to send that out to all the councillors and this committee once I get that from the transport team. I've got a broad knowledge of what has been discussed, but to get that direct list to you would be the best way.
Thank you.
So you'll have a
just to add to that, Councillor Keast, as we did for the first time last financial year, we produced a procurement strategy that detailed each of the projects, how we were intending on procuring each of the projects and the contract mechanisms that we were anticipating utilising for each of the projects. Stu O'Neill, our commercial infrastructure manager, and myself, we had a brief discussion yesterday around the timing for that particular process, and anticipate that our next Services and Assets Committee meeting, I think is the 31st of May, we'll likely be targeting that next committee meeting to bring that information back to the committee and for information and discussion. So certainly we would anticipate that list includes specific bridges.
So just to follow on from that time frame, and we will have that information sent out to councillors.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, are you suggesting it ahead of the 31st of May meeting?
Yeah, man, following on from Councillor Keith's questions, question, I should say, how those bridges are being prioritised, and the sooner we receive that, probably the better it is.
The bridges are prioritised using the optimised decision-making matrix, but the specific bridges that drop out of that process would be identified to council, well, I guess the Services and Assets Committee, to councillors at the next Services and Assets Committee on the 31st of May.
Okay. Councillor Keith, you're comfortable with receiving that information in May?
It seems a wee way off. If the staff already know, it would be quite nice just to get a bit of a heads up. Not that we're going to go telling the world, but if we've got people on their back about their bridge, well, you can give them some comfort that it's closer than it's ever been. Although I suppose they all are, but yeah.
It would also provide an opportunity to be prepared for the May meeting as well. So some information might be useful, Matt, for preparation. Okay, thanks. Appreciate that. Councillor Harper.
Yes, Mr. Chair, just a bit of a follow on from Councillor Keith's comments there. Where are we actually at with the replacement bridge at the Roellen, Matt? Come October next year, this road is going to be one of the tourist hotspots probably in southern Fiordland, and the bridge there currently is under a bit of stress with weight restrictions and stuff. So it would really be nice to have something sorted out, or let someone know what's happening either next winter or the winter after. You got any comments on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Harper, for fear of setting expectations, I suspect, based on recent discussions, that particular bridge is likely to fall either within this upcoming construction season or the one following, based on its priority. So it's very near the top of the overall list, but as per previous discussion, we'll look to provide some clarity around that in the coming weeks.
Thank you, Matt.
Good, thank you for that. Any further? I don't have any other comments or questions. Anybody else? Any further comments, questions? There being none, thank you very much for a excellent report and good detail and information. So I'm happy to move that we receive the Services and Asset Program report. Do I have a second for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Douglas. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good on you. 7.4, page 45, Three Waters Reform Update. Matt, I'll hand that over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, let me start by first acknowledging that it's a fairly significant report with quite a lot of content and context attached. So thank you for taking the time to get into that detail. It's the first significant formal update since September. So look, we've sought to cover a fair bit within the report. Obviously, because of the time lapse between the last formal update, we've integrated a refresh on previous context provided. The last update, there's context around recent activities, central government correspondence, and reporting over recent months, and there's also a bit of a discussion on next steps. Since we last formally reported on Three Waters, we've received a high-level response to our feedback that was provided to Minister Mahuta in September last year on the back of the workshop undertaken in conjunction with the presentation of the report in September. The National Transition Unit has been established, and the Three Waters Working Group for Representation, Accountability and Governance has been both established and have produced a report with a series of recommendations that have been included with the paper. So that this report obviously seeks to cover each of those components, I guess being the three most critical components in terms of new material and context to the Three Waters reform discussion. In terms of the feedback from central government, you'll note from the attached correspondence, the focus is around further design that is anticipated, the establishment of working groups that will involve various members from the sector, the timing of legislation, and an indication that that's largely in line with previous timelines indicated. The fact that it's anticipated ongoing and frequent updates from the Department of Internal Affairs through the National Transition Unit is anticipated, and that the frequently asked questions on the DIA website are planned to be kept up to date and a useful source of information for those looking for updates on the program of Three Waters reforms. There are also 4 key elements responded to with a degree of specificity, I guess, in relation to the items of feedback and clarification sought from Southland District Council's letter to Minister Mahuta. Those 4 elements are detailed within the report. That's the first of which is clarity on regarding how those who are not currently connected to community services would have their voice heard around future service provision, which of course is really relevant to the residents of Southland District, noting that only 33% of our population is currently connected to a drinking water, a council-owned drinking water supply. The indication from DIA was that policy decisions on what service provider obligations will apply to the new services entities are still being made. But that ultimately the provisions that are anticipated to be established will ensure the water services entities will have an obligation to their communities as a whole, and not just those that are currently connected to council services. The second component covered is around how farmers, community halls, sports clubs considered within the framework of service delivery, both now and into the future, from both a regulatory perspective and a service delivery perspective. And the response from DIA was that the water services entities would be accountable to their communities through the regional representative groups, and that there's further design around the role of those representation groups. And that element specifically was being considered by the Rural Technical Advisory Group. The third point responded to was related to the funding mechanisms for Taumata Arawai and whether there was likely to be any levies on public owned and privately owned systems. And the indication from DIA was that while the Water Services Act is now in force, the proposals for levies are yet to be developed, and that any process associated with the development of levies will include an element of public consultation. So effectively, that's we're in a bit of a holding pattern in relation to clarity around that particular issue. And the fourth item that DIA have responded to is in relation to the alignment of the new entities with council development contribution policies. And effectively, as with the third point, the indication from the Department of Internal Affairs is that no decisions have yet been made on growth charging, but proposals will include alignment with existing development contributions, and that the legislation that will be introduced later this year will cover that particular issue. So that's the response from central government received not long ago. The National Three Waters Group for Representation, Governance and Accountability was of course established late last year and have since provided their report with a significant series of recommendations associated with that report. And the executive summary from that report effectively highlights the importance of strengthening community ownership, the importance of protection against privatisation, the importance of adequately ensuring local voice is provided for through the establishment of the new entities and their subsequent design and requirements, the importance of highlighting and providing clarity around the Te Mana o Te Wai philosophy, the importance of iwi mana whenua co-governance and representation, and the importance of improving public understanding and awareness of the program of reforms itself and the proposal and the structure, nature, operational implications of the new entities. And I should actually note just now, I apologise, somehow I managed in the body of the report to integrate the recommendations from the working group into the wrong section of the report. So they're currently, those recommendations are sitting under the NTU subsection. They should have been sitting under paragraph 21 as the recommendations of the National Three Waters Group on representation, governance and accountability. So a minor clarification there. The National Transition Unit, as I've indicated, the National Transition Unit, NTU, has been established. Their role is effectively to run the kata on executing governance decisions on Three Waters reforms. They are designed to be working alongside council and iwi mana whenua, and the wider sector, in fact, engaging with all the various parties, focusing on elements such as staff transition, employment agreements, organisational design and structure for the new entities, things like data standards, metadata standards, and the adoption of a uniform metadata standard for service delivery and Three Waters, and looking at operational management and maintenance handovers from each of the respective local government authorities, territorial authorities, to the new entities, and the practical implications and logistics of that process. And look, lastly, I just want to touch on, from a Southland District Council perspective, we also, what I guess the report also seeks to flag from an issues perspective, some of the, I mean, there's a, you'll see yourself, just by nature of the report being a 300+ page report, there's an awful lot of context and information to absorb and digest and stay abreast of, and we're seeing a number of RFIs starting to ramp up from the National Transition Unit, and legislation to absorb and submit on, and Ministry of Health is out there looking to engage with the sector on other components, and of course we want to be ensuring that we are keeping our public informed, our elected representatives informed, and staying ahead of that curve, all the while continuing with our business as usual delivery of our level of service delivery for our infrastructure. That is posing and will continue to pose some capacity and capability challenges, both now and into the future, well, certainly for the foreseeable next 2 or 3 years whilst this transition is occurring. And of course, with the transition, we understand and we see that there's engagement requested, there's working groups established, and from our perspective, it's we'd of course like to be as involved as possible as operators, as staff, as elected members, in terms of contributing to the program of reforms and attempting to, I guess, influence to any extent possible the design and development of the reforms and the entities to ensure the best outcome for our ratepayers and our communities into the future. But our resources, capacity, capability is stretched and limited. So look, I don't have any silver bullets in association with that comment, just simply I guess a bit of a flag that at various points over the coming years, strain on our resources will be significant, and we need to work to understand the implications of that and prioritise and continue to maintain service delivery of our existing infrastructure in an environment of a new regulatory, a new regulator, and a new regulatory environment to boot. So look, I'll leave it there. As I said, there's certainly a fair bit to digest in association with the report and the context and attachment. So again, I acknowledge that and welcome questions and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, for good presentation, but also a very detailed report. Very good analysis of what's been happening in the past and what's ahead of us. And I'll certainly open up for questions and discussion in a moment. Has there been any approach to central government with regards to the resources that councils are facing in trying to meet their requests? You know, there's continuous requests for information and engagement with councils. And as you've identified, it puts a stress on the current resources that we have whilst maintaining business as usual. So has there been any sort of approach to central government for some form of funding to be able to provide that information to them? You know, if we need an extra 1 or 2 people, be specifically for this, you know, is there an opportunity to tap on the minister's door and saying, if you need the information, we need funding to be able to do it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, a really good question, and I can certainly confirm that at every opportunity, myself and certainly much of the sector is providing that very feedback through to central government and various parties associated with the reforms. We understand that from a funding perspective, there is some limited funding that will be made available for the transition process to local government authorities. However, the funding, whilst the funding is of course an important first step, the real limitation is around available resources and the capability and capacity within the sector itself to respond to these challenges. So whilst we may have access to funding, we don't necessarily have access to people.
Okay, yeah, point taken. All right, I'll open up for questions and discussion. I see Councillor Menzies, you have a question, comment?
Thank you. I may have other comments, but just a question in relation to what you've just asked, Councillor. Where is LGA sitting on advocating for resource? And actually, you've highlighted, Matt, that it's more people, available people to do this. Are we aware that they are actively involved in highlighting this issue and feeding it back to councils? Because it may be different perspectives of different councils, although I suspect not.
Sorry, do you mean LG&Z, Councillor?
Oh, yes, sorry, LG&Z, yeah.
I can assure you that has been on their radar since right at the start of this matter, hence why there was some stimulus funding, but in regards to the human resource, no help forthcoming. I think that'd be fair, Matt.
Yeah, correct, Your Worship. Through you, Mr. Chair. LG&Z certainly aware of the issue and advocating on the sector's behalf. I guess, and look, central government through the lead agency DIA and the establishment of the NTU, they're certainly aware of the issue. They genuinely are aware of the issue. The whole sector is aware of the issue. So it's through their program of reforms and the way in which they're seeking to engage with the sector, I guess their approach through the establishment of things like working groups, whose purpose it is to represent the views of the wider sector, is a means of efficiently capturing particular views in association with particular areas. The working groups you'll see from the report: community and mana whenua, people and workforce, finance and corporate, commercial and legal, asset management, operations and stormwater, and lastly data and digital. I guess that working group approach is seen as an efficient way of, without without relying on 67 individual territorial authorities providing individual submissions in association with each of those various elements. There's a group that's seen to be representative of the sector as a whole, which is an effective approach, but ultimately when it comes to responding to RFIs and understanding the implications for an individual organisation, of course that context and information can only come from that individual organisation. So as I said earlier, unfortunately there is no silver bullet, and we'll do our best to use the funding that becomes available to us to obtain as much resource and assistance as we can get our hands on. But I guess it's just around flagging it as a risk and looking at ways of working with our other local government partners effectively and efficiently. As an example, in association with the draft exposure bill on the water services entities that was released earlier this year, I've been connecting with other larger territorial authorities who have internal capacity for internal legal teams and broader strategic internal advisory resource in a bid to potentially look at ways of partnering for joint submissions on legislation and in doing so, I guess more efficiently and effectively stay across the swathe of information and context that's out there, and we'll continue to look for those sorts of opportunities and of working smarter.
Okay, Matt. Thank you for that. That's good.
Thank you.
Councillor Menzies,
Yeah, some stage I'd just like to discuss Matt's one other point he raised about how we're engaging with our communities, and we may not have time to do that, but just like a time to sit down and have a discussion about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Menzies. I had Mia Tong was up next.
Look, just a big thank you, Matt, to you and your team. This has been a strain on everybody since 2017. I had in my head. But you acknowledged 2018 when we started talking about this officially, and the strain on the team, on the elected members throughout, and especially on our communities has been extreme. But I thank you for this report, and especially around the timelines. I think that sews it up in the other 370 something pages that, if anyone takes time to read them, will understand the amount of work that's gone on in the background. I haven't got a question. It's really a praise. And the reason I haven't got a question is we're still waiting for answers from Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Tong. Councillor Byers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the Mayor there. We're still waiting for answers, and we've got a few hundred pages of a well-prepared report, Matt. You've done a good job there. But let's face it, it's while there's a lot of information there really are no answers. We've got engagements requested, we've got working policy groups established, regional representative groups. No decisions have been made. We've got ongoing and frequent updates. There's nothing to base a decision here. If you really are genuinely interested and progressing a best outcome for our community and ratepayers, how could you possibly make a decision based on what we've got here? So my question, do we have a ballpark figure of the replacement value of all the water infrastructure that is owned by SDC?
Through you, Your Worship, couple of things in response to your comments, Councillor Byers, and to answer your question first, absolutely we can put our hands on that figure. Whilst I don't have it in front of me, sorry, certainly
Just ballpark.
we have a good appreciation and understanding of the value of our infrastructure, and we update that fairly regularly and have that independently verified.
Roughly, just within a few million.
I think Matt has answered that question. He's indicated he doesn't have that information at hand, and I think it's very dangerous to start plucking figures out of the air with this particular subject. So I would appreciate it that give Matt the opportunity to gain that information, and I'm sure he'd be happy to pass that on to every committee member.
There is a ballpark, Councillor Byers indicated in the infrastructure strategy as part of the LTP documentation. If you've got a copy of that at home, otherwise I will dig that out and flick it through to you later today. Just in relation to your comments as to whether or not we have enough information to make a decision, I guess at this stage, my interpretation and understanding of the program of reforms is that there is no decision to be made at this point. At this point, the central government has made the decision on behalf of the sector and has established and is in the process of proposing further legislation that I guess obligates local government to engage in the reforms, and there are opportunities upcoming. There will be opportunities upcoming to submit in relation to that legislation, and that will certainly be something that we'll look to work through and seek endorsement from council along the way.
Yes, so thank you, Matt. So central government has been making all our decisions for us, and yet we do, as a council, have one decision that we can make, and that's what quite a few councils around the country have done. They've joined together to, combine their resources in a way to approach the government and suggest that perhaps this isn't the best way of managing the resources. I don't think there's too many people think that the government is sort of all-knowing and has the best options at their fingertips. They've just chosen one here and they're steamrolling it. So this council does have a choice to, there is an option that they can take and join these other councils and stand up and say, look, there is no information here that we can make a decision on, and let alone make a decision that's a good one for the ratepayers and the communities of our district. So I just think we need to be supporting that communities for democracy.
Thank you for your comment. Councillor Scott, you put your hand up.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, struggling to find the mute button. I guess, my main comment is around I'm extremely uncomfortable with where this reform's actually at. And when you look at, even in this report, in this agenda, we've got a report on there basically saying the business as usual, which Matt alluded to, and we are doing really well. And all of those sort of downward reports in our services and assets agendas for this whole triennium have been along that same kind of note. So whilst that doesn't relate to the reform on the high level of the long-term sort of issues that we're going to be facing as a country with the three waters, what that says to me is that the short and medium term, we're doing okay. So there's no need to rush this reform in the way that it's being rushed, and it's been alluded to by previous speakers and by Matt, that we've got a whole lot of high level information, but we don't have any low level nuts and bolts of how this is actually going to operate. And the centralisation approach, which takes away the voice and the needs of our local communities, is the bit that scares me the most, because we are all different, and we're all different as councils across the country, and we've all got different communities. And I watched that Tina Perot brilliant presentation where she talked about Te Mana o Te Wai and the importance of each individual community sort of being the destiny of their own needs, because all their communities are different. Well, all our communities are different across the whole country. So how, with this being rushed so fast, missing out all of those details and those nuts and bolts as to how it's actually going to work, it does really scare me. I think we're going to miss the boat on the whole point of the reform, which is Te Mana o Te Wai and safe and effective drinking water for our communities and protecting our environment. And yeah, I just really, really think we need to be pushing back on slowing this down and like looking after our communities. And you look at that work that we did in September, October, over that 8-week period, and submitted pages of questions to the minister. It's taken them 6 months to get back to us from a very high level response. All the while, the wheels have kept turning on the legislation side of things. And even when they set up that working group, it took LG and Z to have to rally together and basically advocate to stop the Water Services Entities Bill from going ahead prior to the working group doing its report. So why are those wheels spinning so fast on such important legislation that's going to affect, the water is the lifeblood of all of our communities, and we need to make sure we get it right. So I think as a council, we really need to do something to advocate for our communities, advocate for our water. I mean, it's talked about in Tina's presentation, she talked about the water basically being a body on its own, and we need to protect all of that before it's too late. And I don't want to be undoing stuff down the track. And I'm so uncomfortable with where this is going.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Scott. Just a reminder, it's not our reform, it's actually central government's reform, and it's their agenda, it's their time frame, and if the wheels are spinning according to their time frame. But there's numerous councils, numerous individuals are also concerned about the speed that it's going. So yeah, more than happy that we should send another message to central government and saying, take a breather, this is going too fast. We do need to think about that next step. But that's something that we can discuss.
Just
Councillor Owen.
If I may ask one more question.
Yeah.
Just in relation to that, I agree with you, it's not our reform, but it is our assets that are being reformed that we own. But one piece that's missing in the information in the report is the letter that we wrote to the Prime Minister, and the lack of response to that as well. So I wouldn't mind that being followed up too. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, cheers. Yep, appreciate that. Councillor Owen.
Thank you. Yeah, just the former speakers have just covered off the points that I was wanting to raise, and that's in particular, I think it's really important that we send a message to central government about the speed and the volume of the reform happening, because if it's going to be affecting the ability for us to adequately engage on behalf of our communities, then the end outcomes are not going to be good, and the faster it's rushed through, the more unintended consequences will be at the other end. So yeah, I just think it's really important that we find ways and avenues to strengthen those messages back that we need more capability and capacity to cope with the volume of reform coming through.
Yep, very valid. So as part of this committee, from what I'm hearing, that we should make a recommendation to council, and that we ask council to send another very clear message to central government with regards to the items that you've raised, Councillor Owen, and of course Councillor Scott, that we as a council send that very clear message. So I'll come back to that later on during our discussion, but if that's an avenue that we wish to pursue, that this committee makes that sort of recommendation, then I think that needs to occur. Mayor Tong, you still have your hand up. Are you wanting to?
I just touch on the comment from Councillor Scott in regards to the PM. Yes, I did outline that to Matt, that it wasn't in there, but we all know that has occurred, but I get where you're coming from, Councillor Scott. Cheers.
So just following on from that, I don't think you've actually answered Councillor Scott's question. What was the response?
There wasn't one. We haven't had a response from the PM's office.
That's the response. Good, thank you. Councillor Byers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, we haven't had a response from the last letter, so we're proposing to send another letter.
That is an option that this
I
committee...
think we'd have to start to acknowledge that that's a failed sort of form of diplomacy with this particular government. And that's why that group of councils have joined together to form some sort of group that can get a response from the government. And we're sitting here on the outside writing letters that we get no response from, and say we're doing a good job on behalf of community and ratepayers. It's not that good. It's not good enough.
All right. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Douglas. You're on mute, Councillor Douglas.
Got it this time.
Yep.
So on page 66, we see the entity D, and we see the proposed costs with reform or without reform, and obviously there's a huge difference between $1,600 and $5,000. So Matt, what comment do you have to make on the projection of those figures, both with and without reform? Because it's critical that we have confidence in the figures that are presented to us. So you're the expert in that field. How much confidence do you have that you can pass on to us on the accuracy of those figures?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Some of you may recall from September that that specific information, Councillor Douglas, was quite central to the presentation from Morrison Lowe and the analysis that we had them undertake on our behalf, because we had to I guess pick up on what you're indicating, there was some concern that those figures were inaccurate. So we did some sensitivity analysis on those figures, and in summary, whilst there is some inaccuracy on the actual figures and the extent of the difference between reformed figures versus current form of delivery figures into the future, the general trajectory is accurate. So there is still when we adjust the figures for sensitivity and remove the inaccuracies that we've identified within those figures, so most notably number of connections and the way in which those costs are distributed, the gap between the reformed figures and the non-reformed figures are still significant.
So perhaps just a follow-up question, do you believe the efficiencies that they talk about can be achieved to obtain a 3-to-1 advantage over council-owned assets?
Hard to answer that without a crystal ball, but what I can say, Councillor Douglas, is that was fundamentally at the centre of one of the elements at the centre of our sensitivity analysis. So from memory, and I am mining the memory bank a little bit here, the central government figures tabled calculated a 1% compounding improvement in efficiency over the 30-year period that they forecast, whereas our sensitivity analysis scaled that back to 6% overall. So we were much more conservative in our anticipated efficiencies gained. Now, the central government figures, we are told, are based on international figures, real life experience from overseas, and the efficiencies that have been achieved through other reform examples in other parts of the world. However, as I said, our sensitivity analysis has taken a much more conservative stance, but even with that much more conservative stance, it is evident that the general trajectory of what's being articulated with the figures is accurate in terms of a significant cost differential of a larger entity spreading the cost over a larger pool of people, and that's effectively the premise of the reform ultimately at the end of the day, and that's difficult to argue with.
Okay. Councillor Douglas?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. I see another few hands raised. Just picking up on Councillor Byers' comments also, with just not writing another letter. Maybe this committee seeks that council actually seeks an audience with the Prime Minister or the Minister, and actually sends our Mayor and say Chief Executive to Wellington if that's something a bit stronger that we want to undertake. Some room for thought. Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and you've put the words in my mouth, and I endorse what Councillor Byers said. I believe the response from government have been rather poor, and we're being too polite. We need to do something a whole lot stronger than what we currently have. And a lot of time and effort gone with this so far, and we've just been tacked in with the rest. So need to get a bit rougher at it, please.
Okay, good comments. Councillor Menzies.
Thank you, Chair. Just adding to my comment before, really, that very few ratepayers are aware of the high level information that we have, and we have not yet heard of the detail, as Councillor Scott has referred to discuss this with them. Just to note that we have talked about joining Communities for Local Democracy, but it is my view there is further clarification required on some elements of what they are doing, although recognising the very good intent of those councils in putting together alternative ways of considering this reform other than the four-entity model. But at the very least, in my view, we require further information on the ability of those councils to partner with iwi, and before we can consider that further. In addition, I understand the Minister will be making an announcement this month, making a decision this month and announcing it to us on the way forward. The date is the 12th of April. Do we have a date when that announcement's going to be made? Because we're left with, 18 days to hear that. And then from that, I think we need a detailed plan of how we're going to engage with our community with the information we have to date, but knowing that there's very little in our control that we can do about this, but we need to look forward, I think, in that engagement with what we can do. And I support the recommendation made already that we need to be sending clear messages to central government that reflect our position, our concerns about the speed of the whole process, our capacity to continue with business as usual, alongside all these additional demands that have been made purely due to the speed of this process, and to understand the level of respect that central government have for us at the local government level in advocating for our ratepayers and communities in decisions such as this reform, not to mention the other significant reform that are also coming at us with the similar level of speed, such as the RMA, the health reforms, and local government reform. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Menzies. Very, very good input there. Much appreciated. Councillor Harper. You're on mute, Councillor Harper.
Yeah, that's okay. Just a wee question for Matt there. I see on page where are we? About 59. They say that if we go with 3 waters under the government scheme, in 2051, we're going to be paying $1,640 a household. But if we stay with us and do it ourselves in 2051, we're going to be paying $8,690 a household. Well, that's astronomically impossible. But where actually, and what do they base those figures on? I just can't work out where they're actually coming from there. And I totally agree with some of the other speakers, like Rob and Don, that there's got to be a heck of a lot more information provided to us before we get well, before we can put a tick to this. But as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, we might not have an option to get a tick from government. And I do agree with the delegation to government. Hopefully, might give us some better answers.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harper. And yeah, that's something for the committee to consider. Councillor Owen.
Thank you. I was just wondering, Matt, what the implications might be if we were to begin to stop responding to the requests for information, or perhaps responding with, we don't have the time or resource to compile this information, and a quote as to how much resources required to gather that information. Sorry, I put you on the spot.
I don't think you have. That's already been tried, Councillor Owen.
Yeah.
But what is the? I mean, if us and a lot of other councils are facing the same issues, if we were to do that, then surely that's another way of sending a message that we're not resourced enough to keep up with the level of reform and the rates of information they're requesting.
A group of chief executives have attempted that, and as far as I'm aware, Matt, unless you know more, the information is still required.
Through you, Your Worship. No, look, unfortunately, I don't have any further information or context to add to that.
Got to remember that if we go down that road, there's anyone can apply under the Official Information Act. It is public information. We can't withhold it.
Yeah, I understand that, but often with those requests for information, if they involve a certain amount of time, it's reasonable to recover the cost of that. So why would we take a different approach? We're essentially trying to run a big business here, so why would we take a different approach?
Very, very good point, Councillor Owen. It's another item we should consider as well. Councillor Scott, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I support Councillor Owen there, and I think what she's referring to is good faith, and that's a term that I've heard throughout this reform that I haven't actually seen action by the government, and it's even in those frequently asked questions on the DIA website where I was looking to see if there are further answers to those questions that we put to them in September. And it's been a one-way street. And with what Councillor Menzies said before about the latest announcement coming out in April sometime, the announcement about the mandation came through the media. So good faith to me means a hell of a lot. And it's been a one-way street with us providing all this information. We came on board, we volunteered to opt in at the start in those initial trenches. We've done everything as well as maintaining business as usual in good faith. But I have not seen that return. And I think it's about time the government started walking their talk.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Byers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to touch quickly on this in response to Matt's information there. He's talking about these big bureaucracies, their figures. They're saying that they can make 1% efficiency gains compounding for 30 years, the basis of their case. And I'm not sure if there's many people that would believe that big bureaucracy is capable of making much in the way of efficiency gains. At least they've only forecast 1%, which I think probably falls in around about some sort of margin of error. So it's hardly a strong case, but because they've stretched it over 30 years, they kind of got a bigger number. And then to Christine or Councillor Menzies' point, she wants to send a clear message, and some other councillors, again, you want to send a clear message to government. Well, we know that they're not listening. Rob's talked about good faith. They're just not listening. And I think that's that sort of frustration that's driven these other councillors to band together. And that Community for Democracy, I understand that they really do want to partner with iwi. And in actual fact, it's iwi who at this stage is reluctant to partner with them.
You got that wrong, Councillor.
Yeah, look, I'm going to jump in there. Look,
yep.
Just
yep.
please don't spread misinformation, Councillor.
Yeah, that's
What's
totally
the misinformation there, Gary?
Your last comment about Ngāi Tahu and councillors is totally inappropriate and totally false.
Well, I've seen it in the newspaper, so it must be true.
Oh, well, everything you read in the newspapers aren't always true. And I'm going to move on now to Councillor Menzies. You have a question?
Thank you. Just supporting in principle Councillors Owen comments about consideration being given to stop responding to requests from central government. However, I think we need to be aware that on the current trends, there is a risk of that central government will continue to make decisions without us. And can we afford to do this? And is that in the interest of our ratepayers? Maybe not. Thank you.
Yeah, no, very, very good point. My thoughts exactly. I see, Matt, you've got your hand up.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Councillor Menzies, look, I just wanted to respond to your comments and Councillor Owen's comments. From a staff's perspective, we certainly recognise there is some unease and frustration that we genuinely share around the speed of the reforms and the processes to date. But at the same time, we're very wary that the central government have made a decision and have mandated these reforms. And we're wary of not engaging and taking every opportunity to, wherever possible, submit on proposed structures, to be a part of working groups and ensure that we maximise and use every opportunity to feedback and inform and influence wherever possible the eventual structure and design of the entities and the service delivery environment. So resisting, but from our perspective, that doesn't necessarily preclude the ability for elected members and council to continue to raise and advocate for specific concerns that we might have with the process, with the design, with the timelines, with the any other range of concerns that we might have. But I do urge the committee to consider the implications of not engaging productively with the reforms at all. Certainly from a staff perspective, we see a lot of potential risk in that approach, were the current program of reforms to continue to be mandated and rolled out on the existing timeline. The opportunity to represent our community's interests may be at risk.
I think it's a valid point, Matt, is that we still need to engage, and if we seek every opportunity to put our case, then that's something that we've got to be doing on a regular basis, and I know that we actually are. And there's a comment made earlier on about the minister. I think it's Council Menzies, indicating that there is an announcement to be made this month. We don't have a date as to when that's going to occur. I certainly haven't been advised of a date. I'm not sure whether Mayor Tong has, but I don't think he has. And until we do have that announcement and we do have that further clarification on the government's position, then I think we're not asked to make a decision here anyway. We're not in a position to make a decision on this matter until we hear some further information, and we're starving for it. We need it. We need that information. I see Councillor Keast, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question about, are we keeping a record of the costs of that we haven't been of this reform? I mean, there's a certain amount of money that we've come through for the impetus fund, but these requests for information, have we kept a record of it? Because it's distracting us from our day-to-day operations, and it's important to understand when we're considering how efficient we are and what we're doing. Is that being done?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Good question, Councillor Keast, and I'm ashamed to admit that that's not something we have done to date. It's just affected those information requests have just simply been layered on top, and we're responding utilising our existing staff resource. But appreciate what you're saying is that there is an opportunity cost lost by attributing that staff resource to those responses. Those staff aren't doing what they would normally otherwise have been doing. So look, that's certainly something that we can look to implement with relative ease, even just in general terms, recording the amount of time that it takes to respond to the various requests. And
okay,
retrospectively, it would be simple enough for us.
I think that would be good. Yeah, great, because I think it's a really good idea. The danger of these reforms is that we do not get a better outcome for our communities and for the quality of water. And we really need to, we need to be able to take our communities with us. We might be able to take our communities with us if we knew where we were going. So therefore, we have to almost abdicate that responsibility to somebody else. And the only way to actually, you have to get local to do that. And if we don't have the information, that's going to be a real issue for them going forward.
Thank you for that. It's a very good idea to keep a record of the time that's actually been involved with staff. I have Christine Menzies, and then I have Mia Tong. Christine?
Sorry, I just forgot to lower my hand.
Okay, fine. Mia Tong, do you have a further comment?
Yeah, look, we can feel the frustration just in this session. This has been going on now for months across New Zealand, and we are frustrated. I pick up on Councillor Ford's comment about sending anything else will just be tucked in with the rest. I've got to agree with that, but I'm not saying we don't do it. I believe we need to still do it. And as Councillor Menzies said, there's very little in our control. I think it was Councillor Menzies said that. That's where we're at. That's where we're at, team. We're waiting for a response from Cabinet. And as Councillor Scott said, we don't get told. And that is beyond belief when all these other promises are made. For me to get a ring from the media before it's announced is not good enough. And that's been relayed back by Local Government New Zealand back to the Minister. So I really hope that doesn't occur again. I've got a feeling that it probably will, but let's see what happens. But we're just stuck in a very, very big rock, between a very big rock and a very big hard place in regards to getting a result for our communities. And it's bloody embarrassing. I was sitting on a park bench, on a picnic table at Garston on Saturday, and a local drove past and saw me and came up and said what he felt about Three Waters, which in my view was totally wrong, but I put him on the right track. So there's still a lot of misinformation out there, and we just can't get the right information out until we know what that is going to be. So I'm with you, team. Don't get me wrong. It's just that we're just in a state of flux at the moment, waiting for decisions from Cabinet, and it's their decision, it's their reform, and frankly, if you don't like it, the only means around that is next year. It's government have the mandate to do this, and as Minister Mahuta has said openly, she's going to see it through. So no questions, Mr. Chair. I just acknowledge the frustration.
Yeah, thank you, Mia Tong, and we all do. It's not an easy place to be in. But certainly a point that Matt raised earlier on is that at every opportunity we are endeavouring to influence government on those reforms and what our thoughts are and what's best for our community. So anyway, we've got this report in front of us, which is for our information, and I'm happy to move that we receive the report. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Harper. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Carried. Thank you for that. So good discussion. And I think, Mayor Tong, I'm sure you and I will have a discussion post this meeting about some of the possibilities that have been raised today of what further action we may be able to take.
Absolutely.
And I think that there's a few options that we do need to explore a little bit further. All right, well, that's the end of the formal meeting. So thank you very much for your participation. We'll have a short break. We've got a couple of workshops coming up. So my time is 5 to 10. So if we come back at, 5 to 11, we come back at 10 past 11, and we'll reconvene then. So we'll see you then. Thank you.